Can somebody please confirm? Hello, everybody. Can somebody please confirm if I am audible or not? If somebody in the comment section, okay, great. First of all, I hope that everybody is safe in this situation. And first of all, I like to express my gratitude to the team of Desi Kanun for coming up with this initiative. And today's topic is judicial system in India, myths and reality. The judicial system in India has always been a subject of discussion, not only post-independence, but also prior to our independence also. Because prior to our independence, we have seen that some of the appointments to the court were done by the Britishers in order to suppress the revolution which was taking place for our freedom. Like the elevation of Badruddin Tayyabji was only done to avoid the revolt which was being done by Muslims throughout our country. Now, coming back to the present judicial system in our country, we have seen that at the apex, we have the Supreme Court, then we have the High Courts, and then we have the subordinate courts. First of all, I like to discuss about the subordinate courts. The subordinate courts are divided into three categories. We have civil court, we have the criminal court, and we have the revenue court. Now, before I proceed further, I'll request all the people who have joined live, especially from the Desi Kanun account, please take a pen and paper because I'll be discussing the hierarchy in all these courts. So first of all, I'll start with the civil court. So in civil court, the head is the district judge, followed by the additional district judge. Then we have civil judge senior division, then civil judge junior division, and then we have additional civil judge junior division. Now, talking about the criminal courts, at the topmost level, we have the session judge, then we have the additional session judge, then we have the chief judicial magistrate, then we have the additional chief judicial magistrate, and then we have the judicial magistrate first class. Now, talking about the revenue courts, at the top level, we have the district magistrate, followed by additional district magistrate, then we have the subdivisional magistrate, then the tehsildar, and then at the grassroots level, we have the naib tehsildar. Now the question arises as to how are appointments done in these courts. So talking about the revenue code, there are three routes: the PCS subordinate examination that takes place, the state PCS examination, and of course the UPSC examination that takes place. Anadi, is it now okay with my screen? Okay, I'll go slow. So I'll again discuss about the hierarchy in the courts. So as already pointed out, in civil court, at the topmost level, we have the district judge. Next to district judge is the additional district judge. Then next to the additional district judge, we have the civil judge senior division. Then we have the civil judge junior division. And at the grassroots level, we have the additional civil judge junior division. Now, talking about the criminal courts, we have the session judge, then we have the additional session judge. Anadi, I hope that now it's okay. Can somebody please confirm in the comment section that if the screen is okay? Okay. So now coming back again to the criminal court, we have the session judge, then we have the additional session judge, then we have the chief judicial magistrate, then we have the additional chief judicial magistrate, and then we have the judicial magistrate first class. And talking about the revenue courts, we have the district magistrate at the top level, then we have the additional district magistrate, then we have the subdivisional magistrate, then we have the tehsildar, and then we have the naib tehsildar. Now, the question arises as to how the appointments are done in these courts. So, talking about the appointments in the revenue courts, it is done by the state PCS examination, which also includes the subordinate services, and obviously the UPSC examination that is conducted time and again. Now, talking about the appointments in civil court and criminal court, it is done by means of PCSJ examination. Now, the PCSJ examination, there were a lot of queries which were being posted, like what is the eligibility that is required. Before I deal with the present scenario, it is important for us to know that it has gone through a lot of changes. Like there was a time when it was not considered a very lucrative job. So very few people applied for it. So an open book examination, similar to the one we have, the All India Bar examination, was done. It was an open book examination and practical based, the we can say situation based questions were asked. It changed. For example, in state of UP, it started in 1979 or 80. Uh, so the present system was not there. The present day paper was done, followed by the paper of law, and then of course the interview. Then in 99 and 2000, I'm talking about the state of UP, and in some other states also, it was stated that there should be a rule was brought in wherein it was stated that 3 years of practice at the bar is necessary before one can appear in the PCSJ examination. But it changed, and now there is no such mandate. The eligibility criteria is that one should have a law degree from a recognized college of Bar Council of India, and the age varies. Now the age in state of UP is 22, and in some other states it is 21. For instance, in state of Rajasthan, you can appear if you are in your final year of law, provided you meet the age criteria that is required. Now the question arises that how do we determine the age criteria? So whenever then advertisement is issued, it mentions that the candidate should be 21 or 22 years of age, and the cutoff date is declared maybe like on 1st January 2022 or July. Most of the time it is seen that the cutoff date is fixed in the month of January and July. Now the other means of appointment to the subordinate courts is by means of higher judicial service examination. Now talking about the higher judicial service examination, there was a time when only interview was done. It was seen that it was not a very lucrative job owing to the very meager salary that was paid. Few people used to apply for it, and then interview was done, and then they were appointed. But as the time progressed, and as the government saw that there is more, there's a need for appointing more judges, so they decided to come up with having examination. So it was also like initially there was no pre-examination, but it changed. Now, High Court, the examination of HJS is one such examination which in most of the states is conducted by the High Court. But talking about the PCSJ examination, in some states it is conducted by the High Court, but in some states like the state of UP, it is conducted by the State Public Service Commission. Now, we have discussed about these things. Now, it's important to know, there is this question that why is it that people who are from subordinate services, especially PCSJ, are not able to make it to the High Court or the Supreme Court? So I guess the reason for it is that there is an unwritten rule which we have that no one can be considered for elevation to the High Court until he has attained the age of 45 years. And more so, it requires that someone should have served as an additional district judge and a district judge for some time. So when you join as a judicial magistrate first class or an additional civil judge junior division, by the time you reach additional district judge or the additional session judge, it takes a lot of time. And moreover, the representation of the service cadre in High Court is very less. In High Court, it is 33% is reserved for the people from the services and 67% is reserved for the people from the bar. Now, the promotion to HJS, that is your ADJ cadre, how that examination is done, we'll discuss it. Let's see, when the promotions, suppose there are 100% vacancies in the ADJ cadre. So 50% of the of PCSJ officers give the departmental exam, which is conducted by the High Court. Now the High Court conducts the examination, and they also scrutinize the annual character remarks that are given to the PCSJ officers by their concerned district judges. 25% is for the people, as we all know, 7 years of practice, and minimum age is 35 years. And then the remaining 25% is for PCSJ officers who have served a minimum term of 5 years as civil judge senior division. Then they can appear in the PCSJ examination. Now, what is important to note over here is that people from the PCSJ who are allowed to give in that 25% quota are not allowed to give the general studies examination. They are not allowed to give the GK examination. They only have to give the law examination. So their marking is done only on the basis of the law paper that they have given. This is another reason why very few people who sit in that 25% quota are not able to qualify the examination. Now, we'll be there was one query that please discuss a bit about the advocates in the district courts. So, see, talking about the advocates in district court, there are various methods of appointment. One is by means of examination, which is the APO examination, which we call it. That is the prosecuting officer, which in most of the states it is conducted by the State Public Service Commission. The eligibility criteria is almost more or less similar to that we have in the PCSJ examination. Now, their hierarchy is that they join as assistant prosecuting officer, then they become the prosecuting officer, then senior prosecuting officer, then additional director, and then joint director. The director post is is confined to an officer of IPS cadre. Then we also have in every district court or the subordinate courts, we also have DGC, that is District Government Council, Assistant District Government Council, and subordinate or deputy district government council. Now, their appointment is subject to the requirements or the eligibility criteria that is laid down in the LR manual of different states. For instance, in state of UP, it requires that they should have it requires that they should have a qualification, an experience at the bar of ranging from 5 to 10 years. This is what the criteria is required in case of DGCs. Apart from that, we also have some special councils for different departments. Like for custom, we also have for NDPS acts, which are appointed by their concerned department. Am I clear now? Can somebody please confirm if I'm clear? If my voice is audible or not? Okay, great. So I'll discuss it again, whatever was discussed. When we are talking about the advocates in the subordinate courts, we have, apart from the people who qualify the APO examination, we also have, Chetan, is it clear now? Okay. So Chetan, I'll repeat it again, that the advocates on the criminal advocates in the subordinate court. So apart from the examination that is conducted of the prosecuting officers, the hierarchy is the additional prosecuting officer, the prosecuting officer, the special prosecuting officer, the deputy director, and then the joint director. Now, discussing about the other advocates that we have in the subordinate courts, we have advocates like we have DGC, we have the district government council and the subordinate district government councils. The experience that is required for their appointment depends upon different states. For instance, in state of UP, it requires that it should be between 5 to 7 years, sometimes 10 years. So this wasn't just about the subordinate courts. Now we'll be discussing about how the collegium takes place. Because we often have come across this term that judges are appointed to the High Court by means of collegium system. Now, discussing about the collegium system, nowhere in our constitution the word collegium has been mentioned. Prior to the judges transfer case, it was seen that the government had the supremacy in appointing the judges to the High Court and the Supreme Court. But when this bunch of petitions was, it was at the end decided by the Supreme Court that the Chief Justice of India will also have a final say in the appointment of judges. And that was the beginning of the collegium era in our country. So when the collegium takes place in a High Court, the collegium comprises of the Chief Justice and 2 senior most judges. Is the audio clear now? Can somebody please confirm that whether the audio is audible or not? Okay. So, talking about the talking about the collegium system, there was a time when it was not prevalent. The government had an upper hand in the appointment of judges to the High Court and the Supreme Court. Then a petition was filed, which we all know by the name of Judges Transfer Case. In the first Judges Transfer Case, what the government did, what the Supreme Court did, that it was the very first decision wherein the Supreme Court reduced its power, because it's laid down that it will be the government who will have an upper hand in the appointment of judges. The Chief Justice of India will have no say. But then in the second and subsequently in the third Judges Transfer Case, the collegium system came into existence, wherein the decision of the Chief Justice of India is also final. So how the collegium takes place? Like I've already mentioned in the beginning, suppose there are 100% vacancy, 100 vacancies are there in the High Court. 67 will be reserved for the people who practice, that is, those who are elevated from the bar to the bench. And the remaining 33% will be for the people from service cadre. Now, this service cadre includes your PCSJ officers as well as higher judicial service officers who are appointed by means of HJS examination. Now, coming back to the collegium, how the collegium takes place. Now, the collegium is comprises in a High Court. It comprises of the Chief Justice of that concerned High Court and two senior most judges. The two senior most judges, while considering the name of the people who are from service cadre, they look into a lot of things. Firstly, the ACR, that is Annual Character Report, which is given to them by their concerned district judge, is taken into account. And a committee is set up by the Chief Justice exercising his administrative power, wherein their judgments are marked. And on these two bases, the collegium finalizes their name. When it comes to the people of the bar, there are only two criteria which are unwritten. Very first being that they should be at least 45 years of age. Now, there have been instances wherein people below the age of 45 years have been appointed to High Court. In that case, the High Court and of course the government has to give special reasons as to why they are being considered for elevation at the age below 45. So another criteria apart from the age criteria is the income criteria, that they should have an ITR on the income of at least 7.5 lakh per annum. Only then they can be considered for elevation. Recently, you must have come across this article in newspaper wherein the government refused the elevation of certain judges because they did not meet the income criteria, which is the unwritten rule followed in the case of elevation from the bar to the bench. So once the collegium finalizes the name, one file is kept with the High Court collegium. The other is sent to the concerned state government. Now, state government has 45 days if they want to object to any name. Most of the times, the state government do not object to any name, and then they send it to the law ministry. The law ministry then begins its work. It is where the role of IB agency becomes important, because IB inquiry is done of all the candidates whose name have been recommended by the High Court collegium. Now, once the IB report is done, the law ministry sends the file to the Supreme Court. Then the Supreme Court acts accordingly. Now, it is important to note, suppose the elevation are taking place in respect of Allahabad High Court. So the judge, any Supreme Court judge who had been a judge of the Allahabad High Court, his views will be taken as regards that candidate whose name is being considered for elevation to High Court. Now, once the Supreme Court finalizes it, then it goes to the law ministry. The law ministry then again starts its work. Then it goes to PMO, then finally to the president, who then issues the warrant for appointment of the High Court judges. This is how the appointment takes place. This is more of the practical knowledge that you can get apart from whatever has been written in our constitution. Now, before I move on to Supreme Court, I want to discuss about the advocates that we have in the High Court. Normally, the question is that what is the criteria to become a chief standing counsel? What is the criteria to become a standing counsel? The additional advocate general, is there any age criteria required or not?
So talking about we'll start from the beginning. The appointment of the advocates in the High Court, like brief order we have on the civil and the criminal side, it depends upon the LR manual rules of various states. So LR manual of like state, in most of the states, the experience that is required for brief holder is 5 years. So now we'll discuss all the advocates which work on the civil side. So next to brief holder civil, we have the standing counsel who requires an experience of 7 years. Then we have the additional chief standing counsel, the chief standing counsel, and of course the additional advocate general on the civil side. Now the experience that is required for chief standing counsel, additional chief standing counsel is 10 years. But in case of additional advocate general, there is no hard and fast rule which has been written as regards the age criteria or the experience that is required for his appointment as an additional advocate general. Talking about the criminal side, we have brief holders on criminal side who require experience of 5 years. Then we have the additional government advocate who requires experience of 7 years. Then we have the government advocate who requires an experience of 10 years. And then of course the additional advocate general on the criminal side. Now these experience varies as per the LR rules which are prevalent in every state. The topmost law officer of this state is the advocate general, and advocate general should possess the qualification which is required equivalent to that of becoming a high court judge. Now this is about your how the advocate, the brief about the advocates that we have. Apart from that, we also have panel lawyers in high court of various departments. We can have of irrigation department, we have that of we can say Agra Expressway, things like these. So it depends upon the rules that they have made in that regards. Now, switching over to the appointments in Supreme Court, the appointments in Supreme Court are also done by way of collegium. The only thing is that the state is not involved. It is only the center and the Supreme Court that is involved. Now the question arises that has anyone from the subordinate judiciaries made it to the Supreme Court? The answer is yes. Justice Praful Chand Pant, who initially was appointed in the UP Judicial Service and then he opted for Uttarakhand when the state got bifurcated. He went on to become the Supreme Court judge. Until now, he is the only judge from subordinate judiciary to make it to the Supreme Court. Apart from that, and there is one unwritten rule when it comes to the elevation of the judges of Supreme Court is that unwritten rule or the rule that has not been followed till date. That is the you must have come across that a distinguished jurist in the eyes of the president can be appointed to Supreme Court. But till now, no distinguished jurist has ever been appointed to the Supreme Court. There was one question which was posted a few days back on the page of Desi Kanun that why is it that very few people make it to the High Court, those who have a good practice. The reason for that is when somebody is having a good practice, by the time their name is being considered, their practice is such that that the amount of money that they earn and the amount of respect that they get by their practice cannot be matched in their views and of course in views of a lot of people in our country to that of a judge. Now we can take the example of Mr. Kanhaiya Lal Mishra. He was the very first Advocate General of the state of UP. He was offered the High Court judgeship, he refused. He was offered direct Supreme Court judgeship, he refused. Similar examples are there of Fali S. Nariman, who refused this judgeship, and various other peoples of practicing in the High Court who have refused the judgeship owing to this reason. Because anyone who wants to go to the High Court has a dream that at least he should serve a good term or at least retire as a Chief Justice of any state or a Supreme Court judge. Therefore, people tend to refuse it. Now, there was now the question. One question they have sent me is that the question is that can any person who has been elevated to High Court at a young age, below the age of 40, can he become the Chief Justice of India? See, it depends all on your circumstances. the elevation, as I've already pointed out, it depends upon a lot of unwritten rule. Like you'll be surprised to know that one Justice N.P. Singh, his elevation was refused because the then law minister was not wanted people from scheduled caste to be made the Supreme Court judge. And as Justice N.P. Singh was a Bhumihar Brahmin, he refused his name. Similarly, there have been other instances wherein the elevation has been refused only and only on the ground of caste. Now, I can give you an other example, like one of the youngest High Court judges of India has been Justice P.N. Bhagwati, who became a High Court judge at an age of 38.6 years. So, Justice P.N. Bhagwati was appointed at a young age. Similarly, in Allahabad High Court, we have had Justice K.C. Agarwal, who was appointed at the age of 39 years. But despite being appointed at the age of 39 years, he could not make it to the Supreme Court. It still remains a mystery whether what was the reason. Some say that there were some clashes between him and the Supreme Court, but God knows what the reality is. So this is my answer. When about your elevation, it all comes down to the lobbying that you have. Sometimes it depends whether the Supreme Court, whether the law ministry is in conformity with that decision or not. Like we can take the example, like there was one query which they have sent me is the independence of judiciary. As far as independence of judiciary is concerned, we all know that judiciary is an institution which is run by individuals. So we have variety of individuals. I would say that instead of looking at judges, like we have had examples like Justice, his name was Faisal Ali of who was a Supreme Court judge. Post his retirement, he became the governor of Odisha, owing to the fact that he gave certain decisions in the favor of the government. Similarly, there was one Justice Islam by the name of, I'll spell out the correct name, Justice Behrul Islam. So he was a judge, then he resigned from his judgeship because he gave one decision in the favor of a Congress minister, and thereafter he was given a ticket of Lok Sabha ticket from the Congress party. Or a lot of people have been discussing about the Rajya Sabha seat being offered to Ranjan Gogoi. But instead of looking at these examples, we should look at the brave judges that we have had who have always upheld the principle of independence of judiciary. The best example, in my opinion, and everybody is very well versed with this name, is that of Justice H.R. Khanna. We all know that the moment he dissented in that famous case of ADM Jabalpur, he came to his home and he said to his sister that I am not going to become the Chief Justice of India. My judgment has costed me my Chief Justiceship. So we have had examples like him. Apart from that, we have examples like Justice Jagmohan Lal Sinha, who declared the election of Mrs. Gandhi void despite death threats to him and his family. Now, the question is whether legislature interferes in the work of judiciary. See, whenever legislature wants to interfere in the work of judiciary, what they do is that, I can give you an example. We all know that a verdict was passed in Shah Bano case, wherein the Supreme Court said that a Muslim woman will be entitled to maintenance under section 125 of CRPC. As soon as this judgment was passed, there was widespread protest by the Muslim sections of our society. Owing to that pressure, the Rajiv Gandhi government brought in the Muslim Women Protection, Divorce Protection Act, which is by Muslim Women Protection Act of 1986. This is a very classic example of legislature interfering in the work of judiciary. Now, talking about other means of interference, we can take, see, when we have a very strong government, and I'm not talking about a coalition government, I'm talking about the government with the largest, which is the single largest party. So we can take the example of Indira Gandhi government. We all know that after the Keshwanand Bharati verdict, she superseded 3 senior judges, and then Justice A.N. Ray was made as the Chief Justice of India. Similarly, it was the case with Justice H.R. Khanna. Now, thereafter, we can also take the recent example as that of Justice Gopal Subramaniam. The government did not want him to be the Supreme Court judge, and as a result, he was not elevated. Now, there is a queries that have been posted is what are some unwritten criteria in the elevation. Now, when it comes to the appointment of subordinate judiciary judges, it is seen that on the day the vacancy arises in the High Court, their age should be 58.6 years. And if they are not, then they cannot be considered for elevation. Now, there is another question. Can, after retirement, a judge be elevated to High Court? Yes, he can be if the collegium was done on the day when he was serving as a judge in a subordinate court. Now, there have been some queries about the NJAC verdict. Now, NJAC verdict was the very first. NJAC was the very first bill which was brought in by the Modi government in 2014. It was passed by the Lok Sabha on 13th August 2014. Then it was passed by the Rajya Sabha on 14th August 2014, and then it received it was ratified by the 16 state legislatures, and finally passed by the with the presidential assent on 31st December 2014. Now the NJAC required that it would be a committee consisting of the Law Minister, the Chief Justice of India, 2 senior judges of the Supreme Court, and 2 eminent personalities which will be nominated by the Prime Minister of India and Chief Justice of India. Out of these 2 eminent personalities, one should belong to the OBC or Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribe category. Now the reason it was quashed by 4:1 majority. The only dissenting opinion was that of Justice Chalneshwar. The reason given by the Supreme Court was that it is an interference by the government in the appointment of judges. I guess one of the reasons for striking down of NJAC was that Law Minister was a part of it. And we all know that in most of the cases, the Law Minister is a person who has a law degree. So it is but obvious that the beauty of democracy is that one day or the other, a new government will come. So in that case, it will be very tough to trust the Law Minister who will restore back to his profession of advocacy, that whether the judges who have been appointed by him, will they be partial or not. This was one reason which I believe was the main reason behind striking down of NJAC. But now if you look at it, Justice Kurian Joseph has repented his decision that he gave in NJAC. He had stated that, no, looking at the state of affairs as regards the appointment, I repent my decision in NJAC. And Justice Chandeshwar even said that collegium is nothing, but it is similar to tea parties, wherein the collegium members gather for tea party and appoint their favorite persons. To quote Justice Markandeya Kaju, he says that collegium system is the barter system. Like you give me something and I'll give you something. So this was about NJAC system. Now, talking about there was one query about IJS. So the IJS was initially discussed in the first Law Commission, and thereafter when the Chief Justice conferences took place, the Chief Justices of various High Court proposed that there should be an All India Judicial Service. Then the Swan Singh Committee proposed Article 312K, wherein it stated that All India Judicial Service could be set up. But time and again, it has been seen that it cannot be implemented owing to certain reasons, because it is being said that it will take away the power of the High Court to appoint judges in the subordinate courts. And another reason which is given by various High Courts is the language barrier. Because the drafts of IJS which have been prepared time and again state that a person having an advocacy of 7 years falling between the age group of 28 to 35 years can give the examination. Now, once he has given the examination, it will be similar to that of IAS examination. During his training period, he will be CGM or a civil judge senior division, and then he will be posted directly as an additional district judge or an assistant session judge. Now, the reasons which are given and is that somebody at a very young age, if he is given that post, people say that he will not, the judicial conscience is not developed by that age. Another drawback is the language problem. Now, suppose a person from UP qualifies the examination and he is posted in the state of, say, Gujarat, now PEEP or any other state. We all know that Hindi is not spoken in every state. Similarly, in district courts, advocates generally tend to practice in their mother tongue. So to understand the language will be a problem for the judge. Therefore, it was another reason as to why IJS has still not been implemented. Now, other reason which I believe is a very strong reason is that if IJS comes into existence, it will lead to commercialization of legal education. Many institutions will start coming up who will be offering coachings. So like IS, the commercialization of legal education will be done, which will be a big demerit for our legal, for the legal sector of our country. Now, there is some other questions that have been asked in which I'll want to discuss is that people often ask is that why are people who practice on the criminal side are not elevated to high court? See, I cannot give you the exact state of affairs in other high courts, but what happens in, I cannot be sure, but what happens is that people who practice in the criminal side, as I've already pointed out in the beginning, your collegium comprises of Chief Justice and 2 senior most judges. And most of the times, the Chief Justice and the 2 senior judges normally sit on the civil side and the service matters. Very seldom do they sit in the criminal matters. So this is a problem because they are not well versed with his name. So if they are not well versed with his name, there are very slight chances that he can be considered for elevation. Apart from that, even if they are considered for elevation, the IB report plays a hindrance in their appointment. See, when you practice on the criminal side, it is but obvious that one day or the other you will be dealing with some landmark cases, like you might have dealt with the case of any mafia. So the IB report works against you. That is another reason why, first of all, their elevation is halted. And by the time it is considered, they think that it is better to pursue with the practice rather than going for judgeship. And another question that was put forward was that why are people who are chief standing counsels or double AGs and AG have a chances of becoming judge? The answer is very simple, because they have a regular appearance in the court of the judges who are the member of collegium. And more so whenever any program takes place in the bar, you see that it is easier for them to go and interact with the members of collegium as compared to any other advocate who is not a very good name, or even if he is, but he's not as popular as any other advocate in the bar. Other question that was posted was, why are the office bearers of a particular bar association think that if they win the election, there are chances for their elevation? The answer is similar to the people who are in the state panels. Suppose you become a general secretary of a bar association. Every now and then, the bar association organizes a program in which it is but obvious that the judges who are a member of collegium are called. Now, just imagine for a period of 1 year, you are constantly in touch with them. And provided you have to be a good advocate, no doubt there are some other things which are required for becoming a judge. But if you meet that criteria, that judge knows, okay, now he is the one who has a good practice, I can recommend his name. So it is important for one to bring himself into the light, into the eyes of the judges who are the member of collegium. Until and unless the member of collegium knows you, there are no chances that you might be elevated to the High Court or the Supreme Court. Other question is that why are there so many vacancies in the High Court across India? The answer is that, see, prior to the judges transfer case, the Chief Justice of the particular state it was his parent High Court also. But now every state had a Chief Justice who is transferred from other state. Like a person who has been a judge of Rajasthan High Court will be made the Chief Justice of Allahabad High Court. The judge of Meghalaya High Court will be made the Chief Justice of West Bengal Calcutta High Court. So the problem starts is that the Chief Justice is not well versed with the names. This is one problem. Now, when he's not well versed with the names, this is one reason as to why it takes time for him to settle with the customs of that particular high court, and by the time he settles, he is either transferred or elevated to the Supreme Court. Now, other question which I believe as regards the vacancy is that, you know, when the chief comes, he's from different state. Now, a chief who is from different state, he is not well accustomed with the customs of that particular high court. Now, the members of the collegium belong to that particular high court. The member of the collegium would want his person to become a high court judge. And in that regards, the chief justice might say, no, he's not, as of now, he is not, he does not deserve an elevation. So most of the time, it is a dispute between the chief justice who comes from another state and the members of the collegium, which leads to a delay. And by the time, you know, even if it is consented to, people do not want to give their name because they practice it is so good. Another reason which I believe as regards the vacancy in High Court is that we have not ever come across any government whose manifesto says that if we come to power, we are going to bring transparency in judicial system. We are going to make sure that appointments are made quickly. There are no vacant seats. Not even a single government comes and say, okay, we are going to improve our judicial system, which has always been the subject of criticism in our country. I guess this is one reason as to why it is being seen, you know, that there are a lot of vacancies. And I guess the reason why the government does not want to bring any transparent system in judicial appointment is because we all know that majority of the ministers have cases against them. Now, if they appoint honest and fair judges, there are chances that they might be sent to jail. So this is one reason as to why they do not want to bring about the transparency in judicial appointment. But I guess there have been some governments who have tried to do it, but it is still a far-fetched dream. Now, if please, DC Kamala can tell me if there are questions which are coming up now. Any questions? Are there any questions? Can you please let me know? Okay, so this is all the gist that we have about the previous ones. So we'll be dealing with the previous ones again. There was one question that whether the power of the Supreme Court to review the constitutional amendment oppresses the opinion of majority. The answer is yes, and the classic example is that of the NJAC case. Now, the NJAC case was passed. It was passed by whom? The people whom we have elected, the MPs, and of course the state legislatures. It was passed by Lok Sabha. It was passed by Rajya Sabha. It received the presidential assent. And mind you, this was one of the few bills to which the opposition did not oppose. But what did the Supreme Court do? It struck it down. So this is a very good example wherein the Supreme Court has oppressed the opinion of majority. Because we are living in a democratic setup, it is important for us to know that who are going to be our High Court judges. The reason is that to quote Justice Chandeshwar, he stated that collegium takes place behind the closed walls and on a tea party, and they appoint their own person. So we do not know as to who are going to be the High Court judges. Now you can take the example, suppose there are 160 judges in a particular High Court. The collegium comprises of the Chief Justice and 2 senior judges. Now the rest 157 judges have no idea as to who is going to be the High Court judge. They are not even taken, their views are even not taken. So this is a very big defect that we have in our judicial system when it comes to the appointment. Because see, to quote some of the articles, there have been various articles which state that now the judiciary has come to such this judicial system has come to such a scenario where the judges do every work apart from the judicial work. Whether it is entertaining the plea as regards the Yamuna Safai or any other things, which is not their work, which is the work of the legislature. So this is one reason why the judicial system has to change. And I believe, if there is a transparency in the appointment of judges, the opinion will not be oppressed. Some might do, but instead of looking at them, we should look at some good judges that we have had, And we also have, like Justice, we have had Justice Achar Khanna, Justice Y.V. Chanchur, Justice Jagmohan Lal Sinha, Justice Gajendra Gatkar. There are some examples who have been terrific judges who have never oppressed the opinion of the majority of the people in our country. The other question that was put forward was, why is there a delay in the judgments of the fast track court? I guess the reason is because the fast track court are they are adopting the procedure which is similar to that of a regular court. They are short of staff, and most often than not, some cases are given more priority as given to any other case. This is the reason why we have seen that the justice system in our country takes a lot of time to come up with any judgment quickly. Any other question if anyone wants to know? Can please somebody confirm me from Desi Qanun if there is any other query? Okay, so that's all that we had for our live session. If you have any other queries, sorry, before I end, there was one query that which is a more lucrative job, the corporate or the PCSJ? See, it depends upon what you want to do. PCSJ has its own aura, and corporate job has its own aura. So that is one thing. It depends upon you. So we'll end this live session here. If you have any other queries, you can please reach out to me at my Instagram page, or you can even DM the team of Desi Qanun. Thank you so much for joining.